Sorry, a lot to go through with Captain Siver. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, David Siver, D-A-V-I-D-S-I-V-E-R.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm a police captain with the Grand Rapids Police Department.
Okay. And how long have you been a captain at the Grand Rapids Police Department?
I've been a captain for approximately 3 years, or a little over 3 years. I've been a police officer now for almost 26 years.
Okay. And can you talk briefly about some of the different positions you've held at Grand Rapids Police Department?
Yes, when I hired on started out as a patrolman, was assigned to second shift patrol, also midnight patrol shift, and then in 2004 I was selected for the special response team, our department's full-time tactical team. Spent 11 years in that team, and then was promoted to sergeant in 2015. Worked nights and day shift patrol as a sergeant for a couple years, then went back to the SWAT team in 2017 as a sergeant. Promoted to lieutenant in 2019, was the midnight, one of the midnight shifts shift commander, and then in February of 2022 was selected to take over the training unit until a couple years back. We had a little reorganization that became a captain's position, where now I oversee the training and engagement division, which houses the training unit and the community engagement unit, kind of our hiring, recruiting arm, and our training arm.
And how long have you been involved with the training unit, generally?
As the commander for 3 years, a little over 3 years now, but I've been involved in training since roughly 2002, when I was selected as a defensive tactics or subject control instructor. And then 2004, emergency vehicle operations instructor through the state police. 2006 or 2007, I became a firearms instructor, Krav Maga instructor.
What is that? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Krav Maga is another form of defensive tactics, a system, if you will. And then 2013, I became a field training officer as well.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, and then also a TASER instructor since 2005 or 6 as well, and a master TASER instructor a couple years back that just lapsed.
Okay. Have you received any, in addition to this, have you received any specialized training in law enforcement, defensive tactics, or other use of force?
Yes, the certification courses are usually a week or two long. And then I also have attended the Force Science certification course. That's a week-long course. The Executive Management Program through Northwestern's Policing Institute also.
Okay. And but prior to working with the Grand Rapids Police Department, did you work for any other agencies?
Yes, I started my career in the city of Saginaw back last century, 1999. I got laid off, that's how I ended up here.
Okay. And when you came to Grand Rapids, what are some of, I guess, why did you come to Grand Rapids?
One, for the opportunity. Right? It's a much larger agency than City of Saginaw. A lot more growth and opportunity, job satisfaction, those kind of things. So.
Okay. And have you taught or trained officers in the use of force and defensive tactics?
I have, since roughly 2002 in those various areas. We have regular mandatory training where it's in-service training, if you will. So those blocks of instruction rotate through the year, and I've assisted in those since 2002, 4, 5, 6, in that range. Also, during my tenure on the SWAT team, we trained pretty much every week, and I assisted in instruction or teaching in those areas. I also assisted teaching at Grand Valley State Police Academy in the areas of subject control, use of force, other topics since 2004 to roughly 2015. And then I also taught a couple sessions at Kalamazoo Valley Community College, 2005, 2006 in those areas as well.
Okay, and you mentioned you mentioned subject control. Were there any other topics that you have taught?
Yes, obviously firearms, kind of I refer to it more of a critical skills area, so that component of communication, driving, use of firearms, subject control, kind of just a broad spectrum of the job, if you will.
And in addition to the certifications you spoke of, the force science and the Northwestern policing, have you completed any other advanced courses or certifications in regards to the use of force?
Just the Master TASER program.
And who is the, can you explain what the Master TASER program is?
I'm sorry. Yes, I think you've heard from the Axon rep. Axon is a parent company that manufactures our body cameras, our tasers, a bunch of different devices and equipment. So the Master program is an intensive week-long program where they take you through the history of the taser weapon systems, from the invention of them, every model that's still currently manufactured. While some agencies, currently we have the TASER 10, some agencies still have the TASER 7s, some have the X26s. So they take you through the history, the nomenclature, and you're required to understand how to operate, diagnose, train, and all of those areas, along with some skill building exercises. And then you have a bunch of written and practical exams at the end. And the concept is you're a master instructor, you can then anywhere in the country go teach a TASER class for an agency and certify instructors for that respective agency.
Okay. And are you familiar with Grand Rapids Police Department's policies on the use of force and practices and procedures?
I am, yes.
How did you become familiar with those?
Through being part of the training cadre. Historically, our agency has always had instructor development sessions or instructor days. So we discussed trends and policies and that, and then as I promoted up and became more of a command level, that's historically how the chief's office and work groups get policy changes through by several different entities reviewing them within the agency.
And have you reviewed the specific sections of the policies that were in effect at the time of the incident involving Officer Schurr, which
Yes.
is April 4th of 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, this is marked as Defendant's Exhibit G, I believe. Oh, sorry. Defendant's Exhibit E is the Grand Rapids Police Department policies.
So E is all the policies that are. No objection, Your Honor.
To the admission of,
Apparently it's E 1 through 10 is what I'm understanding.
and removal for admission of those at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. And these are the Grand Rapids Police Department policies, and it's E1 through E10. It includes the use of force, firearms.
All right, so I'll admit 1 through 10 into the evidence at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I guess while we're doing this, we also have Defendant's Exhibit F, which is the mandatory training. And it's Defendant's Exhibit F 1 through 18.
No objection.
To F1 through 13,
18.
18. And you said no objection to their admission?
Correct.
All right, then they are admitted at this time, F1 through 18.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Captain Siver, how many times have you testified in court regarding GRPD matters?
Over the course of my career, I would estimate probably in the 100, about 100 range, maybe.
And in those cases, who are you usually testifying for?
Many times for the city attorney's office here in GR, and then the county prosecutor's office as well.
And at this point, have you had the opportunity to review the video footage from Officer Schurr's body camera and dash camera and the passenger's cell phone video from the incident on April 4th?
Yes.
How many times would you say you viewed those videos?
Prior to this,
Feel familiar enough with the content of these videos to answer questions related to the training and policy topics involved in this incident?
yes.
And have you reviewed the facts of this case?
I have.
And did you form any opinions regarding the use of force by Officer Schurr?
I have.
So he can't give opinion testimony because he's not an expert.
I was going to move to qualify him as an expert at this
You
time.
have to do that before he introduces his opinion.
Yeah, I was not going to ask him before the opinion. I just had asked if he had formed one. But at this point, we would move to have Captain Siver recognized as an expert in the Grand Rapids Police Department training policies and procedures.
Any objection?
Just simply for Grand Rapids Police Department training and policies, that's fine, Your Honor.
So he will be considered an expert in Grand Rapids Police Department training policies and procedures. Is that what you said?
Yes.
So he shall be considered an expert in that field.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Captain Siver, can you tell us a little bit about your role at GRPD regarding policy review and analysis?
Yes. So like I explained a minute ago, as I promoted, especially since I took the lieutenant role in charge of the training unit and now my current captain position, yearly, roughly, we do policy reviews to keep up with national changes or court decisions that would affect our policies and procedures. We continually try to update our training materials, I guess, outlines every session, things like that.
And are you familiar with the GRPD's policies on the use of force?
Yes.
And Your Honor, I do have, I would ask for permission to publish a demonstrative that has Exhibit E, which is the GRPD policies on that.
So you want to publish, I'm sorry.
Defendant's Exhibit E, but I put sections of them just for purposes of trying to go through them.
The ones that I just admitted?
Yes.
Okay. And yes, you may publish that.
Okay. All right. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit, I kind of want to walk you through and have you help explain to the jury what Grand Rapids Police Department policy is on the use of force. So I'm going to kind of have you talk to us about that a little more. So I am showing you what is part of E, Exhibit E1. Can you explain a little bit, can you explain what GRPD relies on for their use of force policy and what that is?
Yes. The Supreme Court case, Graham v. Connor, is the basis, the framework for our policy. As you can see, the language in there, reasonable bound of force, reasonable threat of death or serious bodily injury, number 3. The fleeing felon, that's Tennessee v. Gardner case, but yeah, that's the framework for our use of force policy.
And how do you usually, I guess when you're talking about the Graham versus Connor, can you explain to the jury what you mean by that?
Yes. So the term objectable reasonableness, which you can see that's highlighted there, some of the factors or things to take into account. The phrase totality, the circumstances, meaning the factors of that incident, that time, then, there. So you can see A through G. The immediate threat to safety of others, officers, and C, resisting arrest or attempting to evade arrest by flight, D, the term again, a reasonable officer on the scene. So these are all factors kind of combined together as you work your way through the reasonableness of the force.
I'm sorry, this was a separate page for the page.
Oh, sorry, Your Honor, this is, yes, this is policy 9-1.2, which is defendant's exhibit. It's still part of E1, it's just the second.
It's like number 6 on this page,
Yes,
and then the other one was a different part.
yeah, for the record, the first slide we discussed was the use of force, 9-1.1, which is exhibit E1,
Okay,
section 1, 2, and 3.
okay, thank you.
All right, and now we are talking about exhibit E1, 9-1.2, section 6. So you had talked a little bit about the objectively reasonable officer standard. How does this standard guide officers in how to make decisions in high-stress situations?
Well, mainly that kind of boils down to a similar trained officer in a similar circumstance or similar situation. Would they perform the same way or in a similar way? That's kind of the easiest way to boil that down. And the big factor is hindsight 2020 can't be used in evaluating that use of force, right? The comfort of your desk or your office or your couch as you're watching that video. That's not the goal. That's not the objective there. You can't have the hindsight 2020. You got to be able to articulate or look into it in that time and place.
And when you say that, does that mean you have to, can you explain more what that means? Like, who are you supposed to be, what perspective are you supposed to be evaluating it from?
From the officer on the scene or a similarly trained officer, right? Put yourself in that officer's position. I can kind of use a sports analogy, right? When we're yelling at the TV on a football game or a basketball game with the Pistons last night, put yourself in that position. That three-point shot's not so easy, right? So the circumstances of that right there, not you removed and you're in the safety of wherever. You've got to put yourself in that position. So exhaustion, you're tired, you don't know, all these factors, the totality of the circumstances, it's an extensive list of things. You've got to be able to recreate that and put yourself in that situation or a similar trained officer as you're judging or evaluating that use of force.
And is that part of what you do in your current position is
It
evaluate
is.
uses of
I'm
force?
responsible for use force analysis and reviews, and we average between 500 to 600 use forces a year in the last, for pretty much my entire career. So, yeah, I'm tasked with that. I'm part of the use force review board.
And you mentioned the totality of the circumstances, and you started mentioning some of them. And I would direct your attention to Exhibit E1, Section 9-1.4 to 9-1.5, and this is Section D. And you started talking about some of these topics. Can you talk a little bit more and explain what you are, or officers are trained to consider under the totality of the circumstances?
Yes. So that phrase, totality of circumstances, it's the tangible facts or the tangible things in that instance. So an easy one is size, right? Is the officer much smaller than the subject they're trying to arrest or fighting with? Exhaustion is on there. That has a huge bearing on use of force incidents, weather, distance from the subject, the type of crime. And then the last one, and this isn't a complete list, obviously there's other factors that are going to play, but reaction time is a huge one because it's pretty well understood that action is usually faster than reaction. So again, sports analogy. A pitcher gets a pitch signal. He knows exactly where he's going to do it. He's going to be able to do it with relative control. The batter's got to react to that. If it was easy, a batter'd have 1,000% batting average. So same thing as an officer. They've got to pick up clues or cues ahead of time to try to give them some kind of a fair playing field.
And when you're talking about reaction time, is that something that's also trained to the officers?
It is.
And what are they trained about that?
Just to understand the concept that action is faster than reaction. So officers, for the vast majority of their daily activities, are behind the power curve, if you will. They have to react to other actions. Very rarely do officers take initial actions ahead of time. And I also point up number 5 there. A vast majority of our use of forces, subjects or suspects are under alcohol or drug influence. That's a
And is
vast majority of our incidents.
And is that just like something that you train officers to look for?
Yeah, to recognize that some uses of force are not effective. For example, pepper spray, people that are intoxicated historically don't have, they aren't affected the way that a person that wasn't intoxicated might be by pepper spray. Or they're very resistant to pain because of the delayed response to the intoxication or the drug induction.
And you mentioned like not viewing this from hindsight. How do you avoid doing a hindsight analysis when evaluating the use of force?
Personally, I will watch the video or videos start to finish, and then review the incident reports to try to gather some more information, and then I'll try to break down the video frame by frame, or I don't have forensic video equipment, but break it down through the software that I have available by piece by piece.
And as I guess when you're considering things from hindsight, are these some of the factors that you have to consider from the perspective of the officer
They
involved?
play a major role, yes.
And are officers trained with regard to the reaction time? Are they trained that they might have to make split-second decisions in tense, uncertain, and rapidly evolving situations?
Yes, that's reinforced through training.
And how do you train officers to anticipate that?
The best way we try is through reality-based scenarios where we put them at a disadvantage and force split-second decisions to try to reinforce decision-making skills and try to give them some framework to understand, reasonable decisions or reactions off that.
Okay. And now you mentioned some of the reality-based scenarios. Can you tell us a little bit more about what those are?
Yes. So as men and women hire into the Grand Rapids Police Department, they do an 8-week in-house orientation, we refer to it as, where we start with very basic skills and then progressively make them more difficult, the scenarios. For example, we'll at some point in that 8 weeks, we do a drill, kind of an exhaustion drill, if you will, where they're in a kind of sensory deprived, it's pretty simple design, but it's more or less a shower curtain that kind of comes over top of them. That's enclosed, and then they react immediately to something, and it's usually a violent assault. And the goal there is to get them exhausted, to have that understanding what that feels like, a 30 second to 1 minute scenario, because we found that if we go past that 1 minute, the injury rate gets pretty high. So that's one example. We also voluntarily expose the new recruits to TASER, a TASER effect, a TASER, either a drive stun or NMI, as you've heard, the probe, and then pepper spray. We also make them drive on a racetrack. So we try to expose them to everything we possibly can that they'll see out in the street or out in a real operational sense. And then once they get done that 8 weeks, they do 16 weeks of field training with somebody sitting next to them that evaluates everything they do, every call they go on, every stop they make, and it gets progressively harder. And the expectation is they have to do the whole 100% of the work by the end of that field training program. Then when they're done with that, we have between 8 to 10 mandatory training cycles a year that vary in topic to try to maintain skill sets and build skill sets.
And why do you have the new recruits go through all of these scenario-based trainings?
Just to give them a perspective of what, one, that time-compressed decision-making, that stress of having to make decisions in a split second. And then, like I said, to try to expose them to as much as we possibly can before they're subjected to it in a real-life scenario. So the effects of pepper spray, what it feels like to be tased, what it feels like to be exhausted, We even have foot pursuit scenarios that we do with them, so they understand what that feels like or what that looks like. We really focus on communication skills, and it's a whole list of things from A to Z.
Okay. And you mentioned that you ask people to be voluntarily tased and pepper sprayed. Why do you do that?
The biggest factor is so they understand the effects of it. One, for TASER, for example, what that does to another human being, that if you're tasing them, to understand that, to avoid excessive TASER deployments or TASER rides, if you will. Also for their own benefit, to know if they were incapacitated or the pain associated with the drive stun. Also, pepper spray affects people differently. Some people have very little effect. Some people are completely kind of incapacitated by the effects of it. So just so they have that before they get out on the street in a real life operational sense. They've never been exposed to it.
Okay. And I'd like to pull up what I think has previously been published as the people's, actually I'll just do ours. So I will, would like to move to admit defendant's exhibit. And Your Honor, I would have permission to publish Defendant's Exhibit J and K, which are the videos of Officer Schurr being tased.
Okay. Those are good to consider and make published.
And Bob, can you pull up Exhibit K, please? Or sorry, J. Sorry, can you pull up Exhibit K? Okay. Sue, do you mind dimming the lights, please?
I'm sorry.
Could you dim the lights, please? Okay, this is Defendant's Exhibit K. Can you play this for us, Bob? And is this the voluntary tasing that you had talked about?
Yes, it's consistent with what we do. And if you notice, the retired captain now that actually tased Officer Schurr, he's well within that 4-foot range, and we do this to demonstrate various effects of the taser, where we'll get a quote-unquote proper spread of the probes to somebody, and then the next person we might do a close probe deployment to show that it's super painful, but there's varying effects to it, or we might drive stun somebody, or we might do a third point of contact to create that lockup or that NMI. So that is consistent with what we do, yes.
And based on the close range that Officer Schurr was tased, how close do you think this would be?
It looks like he's probably within about 2 feet of where he sends the probes.
And based on that, how far would you anticipate that the probe spread would be?
That's a previous model. That's an X2 model that when Officer Schurr was hired, we were still carrying. So the previous model, the T7, but in that range, it's probably about I would guess about a 6 to 7 inch spread from there.
Okay, and as part of the voluntary tasing, why? I mean, I guess you've explained why, but do you notice that with different people, their reactions are different depending
Yes.
on their size
Mhm.
and body mass, distance?
Yes, and you can see we have to take precautions to because if say Officer Schurr standing up, those two officers would be spotting him under his arms because of that concern of a fall hazard. So We vary the positions just to demonstrate effectiveness, or as you could see in that video, Officer Schurr is able to crawl a little bit, but he's obviously in intense pain. And without his arms being held, I don't know if he would have been able to move his arms or not. We get varying responses, like you said, by body size, ability. People react differently to being tased. That's for sure.
And have you ever been tased?
I have.
And what was that experience like for you?
Miserable. I will say miserable. I've been tased. Part of it was the instructor program. I think 3 times. I have not been tased by the TASER 10, thankfully. But yeah, it's. I've had different reactions each time. That's the unique part about being tased. Is one time you may lock up and not say anything. You may scream, blood-curdling screams. You may flail your arms with that quote-unquote lock-up, the NMI. I've also been drive-stunned 4 times, and that's yeah, very intense pain, and I relate it to like being hit with a blowtorch. That's what it feels like your skin's melting.
Well, I think you're a brave person for doing it that many times.
That's also why I'm not the master taser instructor anymore.
And yeah, so we could do a demonstration, but we can't. So, so when you're teaching officers what it feels like to get tased, are there any other things that you train them to think about when they're about to use a taser, or when they're about to use the taser?
Yes, and that's why we do a ton of reality-based scenarios. We have specific taser-based scenario drills we do because things are dynamic, right? They're fluid. They're not like that mat room or the taser video where everything's static and I'm going to stand here, you're going to pull your taser, and I'm not going to move. So we try to demonstrate that through various different exercises to show, even though it might be a close probe spread, you could fire your other cartridge and get a lockup, or you could create that third point of contact by drive stun or touching that taser to the individual. So there's varying methods we try to reinforce that there's a whole spectrum of issues with the taser at times, so to try to work through that.
And I would like permission to publish Defendant's Exhibit K. J, I'm sorry.
So it's J.
Yes, sorry. Defendant's Exhibit J. And you mentioned the close probe deployment. Is this what you were discussing?
Exactly, yes. So Officer Schurr there is in very close proximity to it's just a leather wrestling dummy we use, so you can use live cartridges. And that's the limitation of training with the tasers because of some of the dangers with them. We can recreate some of it, but I can't have role players getting hit with live tasers. That's a problem. So we use dummies and things like that don't move, but he deploys that taser from probably 6 inches away and then finds that third point of contact. The other option we've trained in is you fire the first set of probes, you get a close probe spread, then you move, and you could fire your second set of probes to make the connection, the electrical connection.
And is there any, even though in some instances if you're closer than 4 feet or the optimal distance, is there any prohibition on doing that?
No, that's really why we do these drills, just to give them some repetitions and a conditioned response, if you will, that in a dynamic fluid situation, that optimum distance isn't always possible.
And you also mentioned that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but with that last exhibit, was that the same taser model, or was that the prior model?
That's the prior one, Your Honor.
Thank you. With that, for the critical record.
And that was the X2 model? I
X2,
think?
yeah. The functionality is the same, it's just different cartridges and design of the device a little bit.
And does your training on the close probe deployment or the distance you need to be from the person, has that changed at all now that you've switched to the TASER 7? Or I guess at the time you were using
The TASER 7? No, they did not change anything.
And you also mentioned that sometimes you have people voluntarily try pepper spray? Or
Yes, we
expose themselves?
I won't say mandate, however, strongly encourage people, unless they're prior law enforcement from somewhere else on lateral end. But again, for the same concept of to experience what that feels like, your eye ducts kind of shutting down and watering, and just the physiological responses you have to that. And if somebody's never been pepper sprayed, they don't know what their response is going to be. Like I said, some people completely shut down and can't really fight through it. Other people, it doesn't affect them at all. So that's kind of the first step, because in the course of your duties, pepper spray has some residual effects on us too when we use it in the field.
And are you aware if Officer Schurr has been pepper sprayed?
He was, yes.
And Your Honor, I would have permission to publish the People's Exhibit 12, which I think is the graduation video. It's the People's Exhibit 12.
You want me to play it? I'll switch to my computer.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Want to play the whole thing?
Yeah, you should play it, and then I might tell you to stop it. So, thank you.
Oops, sorry. Get the sound.
Can you pause it here? And
Can I charge it with instrument violence charging years now?
yeah, and for the record, this is defense or the People's Exhibit 12 at the 53-second mark. And you, Captain Siver, you notice? Can you explain? Do you know why
Yes.
Officer Schurr looks like his eyes
Yes.
are
So
squinting?
typically, when we expose our newer officers to pepper spray, we're out at our outdoor range. Then it prevents our instructors from getting the feedback as well. So we'll spray one side of their face, have them close one eye, and spray one side they elect to uncover. And then we give them a little bit of physical training type, some jumping jacks, push-ups to get their breathing up, because some guys will hold their breath, or some folks will hold their breath, try to game it. And then we make them perform some simple strikes, kicks, punches, those kind of things on the training dummies, just to demonstrate to fight through the effects. And like I said, some of our folks really can't. Some people, like you see, Officer Schurr is doing his best to get through that, and he's got some involuntary closure of his other eye. So he's experiencing full value, it appears.
And when you, I guess, expose them, depending on their reaction, are officers required to use OC spray if they have a bad reaction to it?
In the field, you mean, or?
Yeah.
No, they're not required.
And you also mentioned that you had been drive stunned in the past. Have you also been pepper sprayed?
Yes,
Would you say that the drive stun is the equivalent of pepper spray?
I would not.
Why not?
The drive stun's, you've heard the concepts of pain compliance with some of these techniques, the kicks and punches and some of these techniques. The goal is to inflict some kind of a pain to gain compliance. And I relate the drive stun is the most intense pain compliance option, device, tool that I've ever felt. So pepper spray is nowhere near. It's uncomfortable and it takes longer to decontaminate, and it has some longer effects, but the drive stun is much worse.
And have you ever trained officers to spray pepper spray, or how do you train them to use the pepper spray when they're using it on someone else?
When we set up scenarios specifically where we want to try to elicit a pepper spray response, typically it's at a, where somebody's not obeying verbal commands, they're seated, you have some distance, because like I said, you'll get some residual splashback, if you will, you'll get some pepper spray back at you. So if I'm in close proximity to somebody, I pepper spray them, I'm going to get the full effect as whatever that person's getting, and anybody else around. So it's really designed in its best application to be a distance type tool.
Do you ever train officers to spray it towards themselves?
No,
Why not?
because they'll most likely be suffer the effects of it.
And what would be the harm? I guess what is the risk?
I
associated
mean,
with
you
that?
could see in that training video, the graduation video from Officer's class, he took one side of the spray, he's got one eye closed, and he's still suffering effects in both eyes. So without being able to shield one of my eyes, excuse me, there's a chance I get at both my eyes and then have double the effect of it. The other issue is the design of the device. Can I show mine, I guess, for the jury? Not spray it, but just to show you the canisters that we carry and have carried for years has a thumb device in it, so it would be very awkward and odd to try to get my thumb in and point it back at me, right? So we instruct to use your thumb to spray it, not your finger. So that would be the other preclusion of pointing it back at me.
Okay. And where is the pepper spray located on your duty belt?
In front of whatever dominant side you have, if whatever hand you write with. I'm a right-handed person, so I have it on my right hand in front of my gun.
Okay. And is that where, do you know if that's where, or do all officers carry their pepper spray there?
The vast majority do,
Okay.
whatever their strong or dominant side is.
Okay. And are there any issues with trying to use the pepper spray if you're at the optimal distance? Is it effective on everyone?
No. I think I mentioned earlier, historically, people that are intoxicated or under the influence of narcotics, a lot of mental health type crisis, people that are affected by that, it has very little effect or no effect. There's also some outside the kind of norm folks that just don't have any effect to it, whether they're stone sober or not.
And in your experience, does it typically work to on certain people who may be intoxicated?
With limited success in my operational use, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Becker, if you wouldn't mind playing the rest, I don't. Sure. And then if you could switch it back to Mr. McFarland's computer. And when you were talking about the drive stun, you had mentioned you had been drive stunned multiple times.
Yes.
And have you ever trained officers, or would you equate the drive stun potentially to the eye as equivalent of a thumb?
No.
Why not?
I guess I would say a thumb, you'd have to know kind of how to inflict that damage to the eyeball, where that electricity coming off the end of the model of TASER. Again, like I said, I relate it from my experience of being drive stunned 4 times like a blowtorch. So I don't personally want to have it anywhere near my eyeball. I would think that's going to cause a lot more damage, but I'm not a doctor. So.
And without getting too much, what do you train, or how do you train officers to use the TASER?
To use the TASER? Mm-hmm. Like in the video, for example, that drill that officer does during his recruit class, close probe deployment, where you fire the taser, activate it, pull the trigger from any distance, and then you know that you've got a short probe spread, so you follow up with that third point of contact, or fire the other set of probes into the person at some point, because then that would give you the distance you need between the probes. We've never taught to remove your cartridges to effect a drive stun. That's just not in our training philosophy or program at all. So we've always been from a probe deployment type. The only thing we talk about is the older models, especially, they had what they referred to it as blast doors on the front of the taser device. So the probes are not super long, so sometimes those probes would get impaled in the blast doors, and then it wouldn't give you any impact to the person. So we've always taught to keep at least try to get a 6-inch distance before you pull that trigger to send the probes, and then follow up with somewhere else, either more probes or drive stun.
And are there any locations that you train officers to avoid when using the taser?
Yes, early on in the taser days, I think actually I had hair back then, they weren't, the dart to heart concept wasn't around, but then after several litigation cases, they changed that so that they've asked us to avoid that center mass kind of chest area. And it's always been preferred that back or legs, large muscle group areas. And we've always instructed that to avoid the neck, face, genital areas, chest area as of late, obviously, but just because of the danger of probes going to those sensitive areas.
And do you also train them not to target those areas with the drive stun?
Yes.
And regarding how you train, kind of going back now to some of the use of force training and some of the policies, what standards in Michigan govern how police officers use force?
Obviously, we talked about the U.S. Supreme Court case, Graham versus Connor, but then obviously we follow Michigan law, Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, any of their case law or decisions that come out.
And when you say Sixth Circuit case law, are you referring to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals? That
Yes,
includes
sorry,
Michigan,
yes.
Ohio.
Yes,
Tennessee,
Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky. Yes, so throughout the year, their cases come down. We have legal reviews or legal updates rather, by the city attorney's office. And as cases come down, we try to glean information to if it has an operational impact on our day-to-day.
And in Grand Rapids, GRPD use of force policy and all of the policies implemented, is GRPD required to follow Michigan law? And
Yes.
what other, and you mentioned, I think, that Graham versus Connor is also incorporated throughout the policy, is that correct?
Yes.
Is GRPD required to follow South Carolina, Florida, or New Mexico law?
No.
Is that incorporated anywhere in the GRPD policies or training?
No. The only thing I would say to that is as instances around the country pop up or happen, we constantly are trying to glean information off that, trends, concerns, those kind of things. But no, not for policies or state law.
And why is that? Why do you?
Just to try to learn, and because as we sit here right now, men and women are out answering 911 calls, doing the daily duties of police work. So it's imperative that we stay up on it and try to identify training needs or concerns or things that we're seeing as trends happen across the country.
And yesterday we heard from some of the prosecution's experts, and I think there was some mention of consent decrees that were entered, I believe from New Mexico. Is the Grand Rapids Police Department trained on or required to follow any consent decrees from other states?
No.
And is GRPD required to, or do they implement the International Chiefs of Police policy guidance into their policy?
No. I'm actually a member of the ICP, and I follow their publications, but no.
And at some of the references to their policy, it was referenced as a policy guidance. does that mean that GRPD is required to implement those policies?
No.
And you were here yesterday, and I believe, did you hear the testimony by Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield?
I did.
And did you hear them talking about this officer-created jeopardy theory?
Yes.
And
Yes, we have to object your amendment, don't you?
okay, I withdraw my last question. Based on some of the generally accepted police practice that you heard Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield testify about yesterday, are those all consistent with what GRPD trains our officers to do?
Could you rephrase that? Sorry. That seems like a broad, in what police practices, I guess.
During the testimony from Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield, there were some tactical suggestions that they talked about regarding foot chases. Is that consistent with how Grand Rapids trains their police officers on solo foot pursuits if there is another occupant in the vehicle? Is there anything that prevents or
No.
prohibits that at GRPD?
No.
How are officers trained to handle solo foot pursuits?
Depending on the situation, biggest thing is to get radio traffic out that you're in a foot pursuit and evaluate the factors there, and then execute.
And is there any GRPD policy that prohibits an officer from pursuing a suspect or person when there is another occupant in the car?
No.
And I think we touched on this a little bit, but following up on what some of the testimony was yesterday from Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield, is they talked a little bit about the TASER close probe deployment. Is there anything at GRPD that prohibits officers from using close probe deployment?
No.
And sorry, 1 second. Could you explain to the jury how GRPD officers are trained to assess actions by arrestees?
Yes. One of the first things we try to reinforce with newer officers is visual cues. Obviously, watching hands, waistline area. It's a well-known fact that the vast majority of firearms or illegal weapons are kind of hidden between the waistline or the hip bones, if you will. So watching hands, if they're trying to access a weapon or a firearm as you're approaching them, that's some of the biggest concerns. Watching for some nonverbal cues, if they refuse to look at you, if they're kind of looking for an avenue of escape. Establish some kind of verbal dialogue with them, whether that's commands or directives, and gauge some compliance or lack thereof as you're approaching. There's multiple factors, but those are some of the kind of first ones.
Okay. And if I could have Bob pull up the PowerPoint that has Defendant's Exhibit E, which includes the GRPD policies. Thank you. And I am directing your attention to policy, and this is Exhibit E1, 9-1.3 to 9-1.4, Section 2. Are these some of the available responses that you were discussing?
Yes.
Okay, and you talked a little bit about some of the responses available and some things that you train officers to look for. And what is the officer's, when can an officer use these types of responses?
Well, the first one, A, there, officer presence, verbal direction, that's pretty much immediate. When you arrive on scene, you effect a stop, you make a contact, you know, like I am here, full uniform, clearly marked as a police officer. And then establishing some kind of verbal direction, right? Stop, hey, come over here, you know, get back in the car, get out of the car. Those are simple verbal directions. So that's the first step, and that kind of gives you an idea as you're visually kind of identifying and gauging compliance off that verbal direction. And then just working down that list, you know, I refer to it as physical controls, where you're actually grabbing or trying to establish some kind of physical control where you're grabbing onto them. That would be, you know, under B there, soft, empty hand, and then it progresses down from there.
Okay. And this is a continuation of that, so this is Defendant's Exhibit E1 9-1.4. Can you talk through some of the available options?
Yes. So as you saw on the first page, this is just the second series of options as you escalate in your use of force, or the force you tried to affect wasn't successful, right? So the top one, physical controls, I just said that, but that really is any type of you're trying to, you know, grab onto them. So now you're into some kind of strike, a kick, a punch. And you can see the sentence up there that, you know, reasonably believes that soft, empty hand controls will be insufficient to establish control and the use of deadly force not justified. And then the next step is intermediate control. So kind of commonly refer to that as our tools, right? Impact, your baton. If you're equipped with less lethal munitions, which the vast majority of patrol officers aren't. And then the electronic control devices, tasers. So again, it has that language in there where you could move to that level, intermediate control before, you know, after you can establish that lower levels of force have been ineffective, or you reasonably believe. So going back to that, to totality of the circumstances or the factors, right? Size is a huge one, right? So if I'm an officer that's 5 foot, 100 pounds, and the subject I'm dealing with is 6'4" and 280, we don't expect them to go hands-on with them. They could escalate to a taser device maybe right away, as opposed to, you know, a bigger officer may have to actually physically go hands-on with them, if that makes sense.
Yes, and sorry, I jumped out of order here a little bit. I'm now showing what's Exhibit E1, Section 9-1.2, and it says number 7, 8, 9, and 10. So can you explain a little bit about what the officer's responses, what they're responding to?
Yeah, so that just kind of clarifies what we expect of our people, right? To gain control of a subject, they're trying to either take into arrest or detain for an investigation, or just general public safety. So that just defines what a response is. And then again, we go back to the reaction time. It's barely understood that it takes some time. Your brain's going to initiate an activity, but it isn't an immediate, right? It takes some time to actually initiate that activity or that response you want to do. And it just goes in there. And then at the bottom, a duty to intervene. You know, that's clearly in our policy that we have a duty to stop another officer from unreasonable force or excessive force.
And now Exhibit E1, Section 9-1.3, D. Can you talk a little bit about what the officer's use of force is generally based on?
Yes. So that language in there is just kind of a guideline. We ask our people, our men and women, to explain what that looks like. So inactive resistance, you can see in the parentheses there, clenching a fist, blank stare, looking for an avenue of escape. Those are what you could see and understand. The inactive resistance just gives it kind of a rough phrase there. And then you work down the passive resistance. That's kind of commonly can refer to as like a protest or dead weight, right? Stand up, no, is dead weight. So they're not actively resisting, they're passively resisting. They won't react to verbal commands. And then it progresses down to active resisting, where you're actually physically trying to block an officer from grabbing onto you. You're pulling away. And then active aggression and assault, you're striking them, you're wrestling with them, or tussling. That seems to be a common phrase. Grabbing onto the officer, grabbing their equipment, and then a deadly force assault at the bottom.
And we already talked about the officers' available responses in 9-1.3 and 9-1.4. But just to clarify, so the level of control used by the officers, is that typically based on what the person's actions are?
Yes, with the caveat, I think they said it in a couple of them, that we don't have to progress through each one to jump to another one, or jump to we don't have to wait to be punched to do, ABC kind of thing, or I don't have to wait to be shot to use deadly force, so it's all based upon, again, that objective reasonable standard. What would a similarly trained officer in a similar situation, how would they react? So it just spells out in our policy those actions and the options the officers have.
And how do you train officers to account for or incorporate the decision-making options when they're in a situation, a use of force?
Yeah, we really focus on that reasonableness. There's more than one way to do it. It doesn't have to be perfectly right. It has to be reasonable with that information they had in that time-constricted decision-making process, recognizing that decisions take time to actually initiate. So you see it commonly where maybe the subject's facing me, and then as I initiate that action, they're faced away from me, so it looks like I hit them in the back or punch them in the back, but as I initiated that activity, they're facing me. So that's kind of the reaction time. We understand that.
And what are some of the challenges that officers might face to make slow or analytical decisions during use of force incidents?
Like we've talked about here, the reaction time, right? They're usually reactive in nature, and you don't have full, complete information. You're going off of your training and experience, or reasonable decisions at that point, or what you can kind of, those factors, the totality of the circumstances. So if a subject's acting like they're armed, they're doing what we'd refer to as security taps, where they subconsciously tap their waistline where a weapon might be secreted. That's a reasonable response for me to key in on that and think that they're armed, right? Or they blade away, where they move their body position away from me, like as you're standing at me, if I put my right hip or right side to you, I've bladed away from you to conceal my weapon. So those are clues or cues that we try to train our folks in, and we expose them to in scenarios to pick up on that, to start that decision-making process. And then we recognize that we try to give them some kind of parameters, and they operate in those parameters, and we constantly coach and train and mentor.
And how does the training account for an officer's reliance on intuition or experience in these split-second moments?
They get quicker with recognizing threats or cues, or clearly a brand new officer, unless they've got vast life experience reading people, don't pick up on the clues that somebody with 10, 12, 15 years on the job was going to, until they've been exposed to that, right? Where you may give somebody 2 arms length distance away as I'm speaking with you, and then you're in 3-foot pursuits because they can pick up that you don't know they're going to run. So then all of a sudden you close that gap a little closer to be able to grab onto them. Things like that, where you allow somebody to move a little further, then you're involved in some foot pursuits, and you learn pretty quick that, oh wait, he's probably going to run, or she's going to run, so I close that gap a little quicker. So it just speeds up the decision making as they get more experience and more training and more repetitions.
And
looking for conditioned responses, if that makes sense.
And why is that important?
Like I said at the beginning, we try to train the men and women to have been exposed to the vast majority of things we possibly can before they see them in an operational sense. And obviously there's limits, we can't do everything, but a conditioned response to input is much better than I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm going to go off the fly, if that makes sense.
And when you are training officers in these scenario-based situations, are they, and like we saw with the TASER exposure, are they usually in very controlled situations where?
No, starting, if you think of the concept, crawl, walk, run, we like to use that, right? So week 1 through 4 of recruit in-house is going to be pretty static, right? We're going to teach them skill sets, drills to reinforce positive reaction, and then we turn the dial up, if you will, the pressure up, where now it's much more dynamic. So that dummy that maybe he's doing a close probe deployment on now is a moving role player in a suit, and he may move as that taser goes, or those kind of scenarios where we run or we get the foot pursuits and we fight back. And so we try to turn the stressors up as much as we can without injuring the new officers or the role players.
And as part of the training, I guess just finishing up some of the policy stuff. Once an officer, and I'm sorry, for the record, I'm showing what's Defendant's Exhibit E1, Section 9-1.4. Once an officer makes the decision to use deadly force, are they required to try other options?
No.
Why not?
If the situation, that officer has deemed that situation has resulted in they're going to elect to use deadly force, they need to stop that threat in an immediate sense. So lower levels of force have a very less likelihood of becoming successful, especially if you've escalated through multiple options of force and now you're at a deadly force encounter. Like we've talked about, the time-constricted decision-making, exhaustion, various factors are going to have an impact in that. So deadly force, there's not time to go back to other options.
And are there some instances where it would be reasonable for an officer to go directly to deadly force without having to try
Yes.
any of the lower options?
Yes.
Can you give an example of when that might be?
Yeah. For example, I try to stop somebody here right outside the courthouse on Ottawa, somebody walking on the street. As I go to make contact with them, hey, stop for a second, they spin and they produce a firearm. I don't have to try to use empty hand tactics or anything else. I can immediately pull my firearm and defend myself.
And once an officer decides to use deadly force, are they, I may have said this a little bit already, but are they required to use a different force option before they resort to their firearm?
No.
And once they decide to use their firearm, can you explain how you train officers to use their firearm once they've decided that deadly force is necessary?
Yes, so we do usually 3 to 4 times a year. Besides scenario-based stuff, we actually do firearms training with different weapon systems, different drills, whether it's standard marksmanship, point shooting, close quarter battle type drills where you're very close to targets. There's a whole multitude of training that goes into the use of firearms. And then in realistic based scenario training, we have the option of using training devices so we can, role players can recreate a deadly force encounter and the officer going through can deliver deadly force without injuring either party. So we have that a lot where we build specific scenarios to elicit those responses. Yeah. I'm showing you what is marked as Defendant's Exhibit E2, and this is the Firearms Procedure 9-2.2. Can you explain when an officer may draw or display their firearm? Yeah, it clearly says right there, fear for their safety of the officer, safety of others. So easy example of that is frequently we have break-ins around the city where a broken window in a business at 2 a.m., the officers are authorized to pull their firearms as they clear that structure or begin to clear that structure.
And once officers decide to use deadly force, now I'm showing Defendant's Exhibit this is still E2 9-2.1. When can an officer discharge their firearm?
So it starts with a reasonable threat of death or serious bodily injury to yourself, another citizen, or another officer, and then to present the escape of a inherently violent fleeing felony crime, and the probable cause to believe that that subject poses a reasonable threat to others or officers.
And when you are training them on how to use the firearm, where do you train them to?
Yeah, so kind of a misconception, unfortunately, is shoot to wound. We train to stop the threat, and we teach to shoot center mass because that's the largest target area that people have. So upper chest, upper back, those areas. We don't train to shoot limbs or shoot the gun out of somebody's hand because the likelihood of success is not very high. So that, in its easiest explanation, is the preferred target areas for. But like I said, some of the drills, it's point shooting, if you will, where you're drawing your firearm under stress and you're firing rounds at a target. So you're not actively aiming your firearm, if that makes sense. You're not looking through your sights, developing a sight picture, taking your time. It's under duress, under stress, and you're just trying to get a response out right away.
And I think you mentioned close quarter battle.
Yeah, so it's a term, sorry, monikers and acronyms, but all that means is that threat is probably within arm's reach of me. So my arms are almost 3 feet long, probably. So that arm distance away from me, it's a very close-up threat. I don't have time, right, to create distance or put something between us. I've got to immediately defend myself or another. So we've gone through this for years now of draw your firearm, and obviously I can't extend it because I'm going to be presenting that to them. So I'm going to keep that firearm close to me and point shoot. And with the cycle of our handguns, the chance, so not that this is a firearms lesson, but we have a semi-automatic handgun. So as I pull that trigger, there's a top part, the slide, that will cycle and come back. If I'm too close to my clothing, and we're in Michigan, so we're in heavy clothing 8 months of the year, I feel like, I've got to keep that slide away from me. So we teach to put the bottom of that firearm, the magazine that the rounds or the bullets are in, against our rib cage and shoot from here. So it gives me a little standoff distance, and it also prevents a malfunction of my firearm, if that makes sense. So that's a standard kind of close quarter battle drill we do, or close quarter combat drill we do at the range. And that's a very static in the sense of I'm standing in front of a paper target and I'm doing that. Due to safety and concerns for injury to my role players and instructors and cops, I can't really recreate those drills very well in training. There's some products out there that you kind of use, but it doesn't give you the same feel. So it's really hard to replicate that in a dynamic training scenario, if that makes sense.
And you mentioned something, I think, that it would be ineffective or something in certain circumstances. Can you explain what you mean by that?
I'm sorry, one more time.
Did you say something about it being ineffective at certain, using it in a certain manner when you're doing that?
Just more of a concern of creating a malfunction myself. So if I bring that firearm in front of myself, the slide could impact me or hit my vest and not cycle properly. So as you pull your trigger, a bullet goes, that round ejects out and a new round feeds in. So if it doesn't cycle properly, you've got a one shot and that's it. So that's why we really focus on bringing that firearm up, kind of that rib cage area up here, to prevent any kind of malfunction.
I think we've gone through all of these. One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and I'm showing what is marked as defendant's exhibit. This is part of E1, and this is 9-1.6. And this is also talking about the authorized use of force. But can you tell us a little bit about the verbal directives that are mentioned? What are in number E4. Can you explain what that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, yeah, whenever reasonably possible, officers shall provide verbal directives before deadly force is used. And I like to tell our newer officers, that's, for example, you're in a traffic stop, you've got multiple people in the car, and you see somebody reaching for a firearm. That's a proper time to tell them, don't reach that firearm, I'm going to shoot you, right? A directive could be stop, drop it. It's a direction, not necessarily a warning. And when feasible, under life-threatening stress, time-compressed decision-making, exhaustion, some of those, when feasible, doesn't really make sense. It's not practical.
And with this verbal directive, does it require you to say, like, stop or I'll shoot?
No.
I think that's all the policy stuff that I have for you for now. Sorry
Okay.
if we've bored everyone. But, all right, so we've talked a little bit about your training and the in-house training. You've talked a lot about kind of how you train officers to be prepared for the use of force encounters in the real world through the scenario-based and the field training. One of the things that it seems like is kind of ingrained throughout this is that a lot of the responses are up to the officer's discretion. Can you explain why that is?
That we don't want to limit telling our men and women there's one response to that input or that stimulus or that situation, because it's just not practical. Like I explained, size of the officer, their ability. Clearly, I'm not a young man anymore, right? So if it's a 25-year-old officer compared to almost 50, right, there's physical skill differences there or experience. So we try to give them parameters, if you will, and to operate inside those. So their decision doesn't have to be perfectly right. It just has to be reasonable for that situation and circumstance.
And if one officer would do something one way, but another officer might do it a different way, does that make it unreasonable?
No.
Why not?
Like I said, size, skill, and again, I'll use the term articulate. If I explain what I saw, what I felt, why I did what I did, then maybe it looks different than me watching it, right? Like you can't be in somebody's mind to know what they saw, what they thought, what they experienced. You know, videos give you a perspective, but not living through the moment.
And you mentioned that officers' reactions are not meant to be perfect.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, just are they reasonable? Keep coming back to that term. Are they reasonable for that situation? So yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, and we constantly review and coach and mentor and train to try to perfect that craft, if you will. But again, we don't expect perfection. It's just got to be reasonable, because they don't have the luxury of having all the time in the world to make a decision, come up with a tactical plan, and have every asset and resource available before they initiate that plan. They've got to make split-second decisions under a lot of times serious stress and with a lack of information.
And is there ever one right option?
No.
I think you've explained, but why not?
Yeah, just going back to that last answer, there's variable factors to it. You know, the officer, their experience, their what they recognize as a threat, where one might not. Though there's just a multitude of factors, and that's why we don't bracket people down into one way, one track, because it's not practical.
Okay. All right, and Your Honor, could I have a brief moment? I realize I need to get my notes. just took a brief break. I just need to get some of my notes from my computer. Or we can.
3:15, Your Honor, maybe it's time for the afternoon break, if court declined.
Okay, I was gonna do one at 3:15, we're almost there, so. We will take a break for 15 minutes, come back at 3:30. So meanwhile, please remember to leave your notes inside out of your chairs, and that you're not deliberating, so you're not to discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, and also the restrictions are still in place to avoid news reports about this case in the media and on social media. And we'll see back in 15.
Yes, I'm ready, Your Honor, sorry.
And also, Mr. President.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Jurors come in.
All right. Captain Siver, I would like to kind of walk through some of the training that Officer Schurr received and how it has been applied in this situation. Bob, can you please pull up Defendant's Exhibit B, which is the sync video with the transcript?
You're saying B as in boy.
B as in boy. Okay. And before we play the video, I just kind of, could you explain to the jury kind of some of the things that you train officers to do when conducting a traffic stop?
Yes. One of the biggest things is to get radio traffic out as soon as possible, because there's a lot, as you can see in the body camera of Officer Schurr. He's got a computer by him, a radio, he's got to operate the vehicle, turn the emergency equipment on. So try to get radio traffic out as soon as possible, because pulling a traffic stop is an unknown risk. You don't know, again, you're back at that reactive point of their actions. So first thing is radio traffic. Simple as, the description of the vehicle, license plate, location you're at. If you can tell how many occupants are in it. And then activate your emergency equipment. and then approach the vehicle once it comes to a stop.
Okay. And Bob, if you could play the video, start playing the video through RFN 1246.
Nelson, Northern Briggs, Edward King Hall, 9367, Hamilton.
Okay, so for the record, we're stopped at RFN 1236. And kind of backing up a little bit, through when, we've talked about this a little bit, but there was no sound in the beginning. What does that mean? Why is that?
Yes, our obviously Axon, the symbols in the top right, same manufacturer's TASER, our in-car video, and our body camera. So there's an automatic built-in delay of 30 seconds. So there's automatic activations. So when Officer Schurr activates his emergency lights, that activates his body camera and his in-car video. It loops back 30 seconds. So there's multiple opening the back doors, manually, or activating the gun locks, the shotgun or rifle, speed. If another officer in the area activates their equipment or their body camera, it Bluetooths into yours. So there's a multitude of factors, and that can be varied by agency, but ours is a 30-second loop. So that's why there's no sound until you see him on the radio and you can actually hear him. So it's just the 30 seconds catching back up. So that's what you see there.
And leading up to this point, was there anything that you would train officers to look for up to this point?
Yes, obviously it's 8:15 in the morning or 8:11 in the morning, so there's not a lot of traffic. It's a weekday, and as you see, if you could tell, Officer Schurr is doing a U-turn to turn and follow that vehicle. And as he's making that U-turn, you see it make a turn, and then as he turns onto that street, it turns again. So that could be a clue of they're trying to evade you or get to a driveway to pull into and quickly get into a house. Again, just possible factors that we train our officers to look for as they're affecting that or making that traffic stop.
And here, if you see at this point, when Mr. Leoya opens the door and is stepping out of the vehicle, how do you train GRPD officers, or what do you train them to do if someone jumps out of the car before the officer has had a chance to get out of his car?
Yes. It's a concern because they again, the action versus reaction. The driver is already opened the door, is getting out of the car. The officer's still on the radio or putting his vehicle in park, got to open the door to get out. Countless cases a year of officers being ambushed inside their cars as they pull a traffic stop. Happens far too often. So that's obvious the gravest concern. We try to we show some videos of that and show statistics so they have that in the back of their mind. They understand that, and not to say that that's possible in every case, but it's a concern. They have to address that. So the driver's out of the car already, so Officer Schurr's got to hustle to get his car in park, get his car door open, and address that driver immediately. So like I talked about a little bit ago, watching the hands is the biggest concern right away to see if he's trying to access the weapon, if he's blading away, like I talked about, or hiding a side of his body because he could potentially be armed. It happens. It's one of those things that steps up your concern when somebody immediately jumps out of a car.
And what do you train officers to think about if someone does jump out of the car?
One, to get out of your car. You're not in a good spot in there because it kind of locks you in. Like I said, ambushes happen, or people close that distance and are on top of you in your car before you can get out. So get out of your car, give some verbal direction right away to try to gauge. One, then you can feel for what that situation is. Maybe it is somebody that's late to school or giving their kids a ride somewhere and they're just trying to explain it. But you got to get out, have some verbal communication with them, evaluate that situation right away. So biggest thing, get out of your car, watching the hands and the waistline area, and then have some verbal direction with them, or communication with them.
And why, what manner of verbal direction do you train officers to have in this
We're trying to
situation?
be firm, right? It's not the time to, good morning, my name's Officer or Captain Siver with the Grand Rapids Police Department. They're already out of the car, they're approaching you. It can be a grave concern, so establish some type of control. Be professional, but establish firm control, verbal direction right away.
And what do you train officers to think about someone who's jumped out of the car?
Like I said, not to say every instance like this is going to be some kind of a tragic ending or you're going to be viciously assaulted or killed, but it's a possibility. So you've got to mitigate that right away. So getting out of your car, addressing them. Like I said, sometimes it's just they're being evasive. Again, you're reacting to that driver. The driver knows if what they've done or if they have a valid license, they don't have a license, they have something in the car, they don't want you to find out. So again, far more common for people to flee right here or try to distract you enough to get you off of your preliminary investigation there.
Okay. Bob, if you could play, could you dim the lights, please? Bob, could you please play the video through RFN 1846?
Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car! Stay in the car! Get in the car! Dude, I'm stopping you. You have a license? You have a license? I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak English? Yes.
Yeah. Okay, and for the record, this is RFN 1830. Okay. So I want to walk through some of this. What do you train officers to do when they approach the vehicle in this instance where someone's jumped out of the car?
Like I said, watching the hands is the gravest concern right there to make sure they're not going to try to access a weapon. And establishing some type of verbal direction commands to gauge cooperation. Officer Schurr clearly is instructing him to stay in the car, get back in the car. He's not cooperative. And then he wants to argue why he's being stopped. Officer Schurr is trying to communicate with him, confirms he speaks English. So he closes that distance to cut off an avenue of escape. That way, if the subject tries to flee, he's much better positioned to give chase on foot. And
can you talk about, why does Officer Schurr, why do you train officers to ask for a driver's license?
It's just the immediate part of the traffic stop. One, to identify the subject, and then two, to establish whether they have a valid license or a license on them, because then that could lead down the path of having a reason for a valid arrest right away. So you can effect an arrest and continue that investigation.
And if someone doesn't produce a license, what do you train officers to do?
Typically, driving while unlicensed without your license, it's a misdemeanor offense in the state of Michigan, so they're going to at least be temporarily detained, if not physically arrested. So if they refuse to produce a license or they don't have one, then try to cooperatively talk them into handcuffs. If not, then you have to physically restrain them.
Okay. Bob, could you play the video to RFN 1945, please?
Can I see your license?
And for the record, this is RFN 1949. Do you observe the driver at this point doing anything when Officer Schurr asks him for a license?
Yes, when Officer asks the driver for the license, the driver reaches to, it appears his right back pocket, taps it to like, I'm going to get it out of my wallet, and then just taps and keeps moving without producing a license. So again, those are verbal cues. We try to train our people to recognize that that's evasive or evasion, if you will, that you've asked them for the license a few times, they're not providing it, and now they're, whether they're trying to initiate a plan or what, they're trying to keep you from your direct action.
Bob, could you play through RFN 3195, please?
The plate doesn't belong in this car. Do you have a license or no? Do you have a driver's license? Where is it at? Get it from me. The plate does not belong in this car. No. Stop.
Okay, and for the record, this is RFN 3213. At this point, what do you observe about Mr. Leoya?
At the start of the video, or start of this clip, rather, excuse me, Officer Schurr, again, asked him for his license. He opens the door and asks the passenger to find it. Again, not an uncommon thing where, again, trying to be evasive, try to distract you. Officer Schurr gives him an opportunity to produce a license. He doesn't, and he's going to he's under arrest for driving on license or without a license, at least at this point. So he right before the end of this, the driver starts to move towards the north of the car, which is common to, hey, I don't have a license. I know I don't have a license. I'm going to try to maybe create some distance and run, flee. So Officer Schurr grabs him by his upper arm and shoulder there, it looks like.
Okay, and this is how you train officers?
Yeah, to grab and to, limit that avenue of escape, and more times than not, just that grab and pulling their hands on their back is enough to effect an arrest.
Bob, could you please go forward to RFN 3195? Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Can you go forward to 3344?
Stop. Put your hand. Stop.
Oh, sorry. Could you back up a little bit? Okay. So leading up to, and for the record, this is RFN 3344. Throughout this, can you describe what you saw here?
Yes. So the start of the clip, Officer Schurr's got a hold of the driver, and as he tries to, I assume, try to bring his arms behind his back, the driver spins, and by spinning is able to push the officer off of him, or kind of launch him, if you will, almost off of him. And then Officer Schurr goes back in to grab onto him again, and the driver actually strikes at his hands to knock him away, and then is creating this distance here.
Okay. Bob, could you just back up frame, a few frames?
This is 324 years.
Thank you.
So you can see it appears Officer Schurr's feet are, if you go back and forward a little bit, his feet actually come off the ground. They're off the ground there. So as the driver spins and Officer Schurr's got a hold of him, he's actually off the ground. So that movement by the driver is enough to actually physically pick him up and spin him. And then he breaks his grip by actually, on the bottom screen, you can see it appears as the driver brings his right arm down. As you can see, it knocks Officer Schurr's left hand off his grab, and then he ends up hitting his own arm and knocking it off by that strike or block of the driver into Officer Schurr.
And at this point, what level of resistance would the driver be using, Mr. Lee?
active aggression, in my opinion, by the strikes. And it went from a driving offense to now a resist and obstruct or assault on a police officer.
And what type of offenses are those?
State R&O charge is a felony. Depending on the assault on a police officer, that could be two, but not here, I would think.
Okay, and is there anything about the positioning of Mr. Leoya that you observe in this that you would train officers to look for?
Yes, so I would refer to this as an inside position. So clearly, at the beginning, Officer starts with his like a chest to back position where he's behind him. That's ideal. But when we're face to face, that's a problem because then we're much closer to be assaulted. Clearly, the driver can block your hands or punch your hands away. It's difficult to control a human being face to face. So ideally, we want to be faced away.
Okay. All right, Bob, could you please play this through 3402? Okay, for the record, this is RFN 3415. At this point, and I guess a few frames, backing up a few frames, did you observe anything about the vehicle that Officer Schurr was driving that day?
He's got his lights activated and it's fully marked. We drive Ford Explorers, more or less sedans, so they're fully marked. It's got a full light bar on it and it's activated. And he's in a full uniform, full police uniform.
Okay. And you see Officer Schurr reaching for his radio. Oh, I guess we can play it. Bob, if you want to play the video now through 3471. And for the record, this is RFN 3477. When Officer Schurr calls out on the radio, we got one running. What does that mean?
It's just simple radio traffic to let dispatch and other units know that you're in a foot pursuit. So again, it's imperative to get that information out because now you're separated away from our car. Our car's got a locator in it, but we don't have locators on human beings. So as Officer Schurr gets away from his cruiser, it's inherently concerning because we don't know where he is. So for accountability and manpower issues. But so he gets the radio traffic out right away. And if you, in that freeze frame in the bottom, you notice I spoke about concerns of secreted weapons or people carrying weapons from hip bones. It's kind of widely accepted in our law enforcement industry that to access that firearm, I've got to create some kind of an arm angle to access that. So on foot pursuits, commonly we see that elbow bend, and not to say that everybody is armed that we chase, but it's something that we train our officers to watch for, to be cognizant of, because it can easily turn into them accessing a firearm. And we've had numerous cases in my career have it happen. So it could be something as they're trying to keep clothing up, but it is a trained cue for our officers.
And when Officer Schurr called out that he had one running, how do you train other officers to respond to that?
So when he calls out his traffic stop, available area units will start that way. Normal driving conditions, obeying traffic laws, no emergency equipment. Again, it's 8:10, 8:15 in the morning. It was a weekday, so traffic's probably pretty congested in the east service area on the southeast side of the city. So once he calls out a foot pursuit, at least the east units should be responding emergency mode, lights and siren, if they're available. If not, other service areas, so directly to the north of that would be our south service area, and then north, central, and west. So manpower was an issue that day. We were very short-staffed. So whatever units were available should have been heading emergency fashion, lights and siren, and driving with due care and caution, but obviously exceeding the speed limit.
And why do you train the officers to respond with lights and sirens?
Because of the risk. You're fighting with someone. We know that we want more cops there than not. So to try to get people there as soon as possible. One, the cruiser's unattended. You don't know, sometimes officers end up in backyards, they don't know exactly where they are. They end up in houses sometimes as people flee into a house. So there's a multitude of reasons, but we want to get that radio traffic out right away.
And at this point, once someone is under arrest, do you train GRPD officers that they can just let them go?
No, that is not common practice.
Why not?
Because there's an inherent risk to the community. Just in this example here, if this stops, the driver has already committed a couple arrestable violations. He's fleeing on foot. We've had numerous cases of people fleeing into other people's homes, breaking into homes, outbuildings. Like I said, it's a school time of the morning. So that's just a risk to the community. That subject knows they did something that they're going to go to jail for, and they've fought with the police, and they're running away. So, and if the officer, say he gets back in his car and starts driving to find him again, there's no saying that subject can't get back in his car and drive away, right? And now we've created that jeopardy. So we train people to chase and effect an arrest.
And what do you train them to do if there is another person in the vehicle?
Be aware of it, but it's more of a risk when we're fighting around cars or struggling with people and there's 4 people in the car. Some of those things, we've had multiple instances of that, but running by a car that's occupied is not, be aware of it, but it's not a hindrance to say don't ever do that.
And in some instances, is there any training that you provide on someone who is in this situation where they're by themselves and they have to engage in a foot pursuit?
Yes, we do multiple scenarios with that in-house where we force the officers to run, Jace is the role player, and then work through the scenario.
And is there anything that would prohibit Officer Schurr from continuing to follow
No,
Mr. Leroy at this
no,
point?
we and that's why we train on it. We talk about some of the risks, right? Where people potentially are armed, following the same path, nighttime, backyards. There's a multitude of reasons, but or issues, but that's what we train to be aware of it and mitigate those as best possible.
And pursuant to GRPD policy and training, is it your opinion that Officer Schurr was reasonable in pursuing Mr. Leoya at this point in a foot chase?
Yes.
Even though there was someone else still occupied in the car?
Yes.
Could you please play the video to RFN 3555? Okay, for the record, this is RFN 3555. So what do you train officers to do once someone is actively running away?
Just try to catch them, obviously. And that's with varied success sometimes, but obviously Officer Schurr catches up to the driver pretty quickly. And then it's sometimes people give up right away when you tell them to stop. They lay down, they put their hands up. Other times we have to tackle them to the ground or push them to the ground. And clearly in this incident, Officer Schurr pushes the driver to the ground or tackles him to the ground.
And based on what Officer Schurr, or it appears that he would know at this point, just that the plates didn't match the car and the driver was starting to run away, what would you train, or I guess how do you train GRPD's officers, or what do you train them to think about with regards to the car?
It's unknown. Again, it could be a multitude of factors there. An improper plate or a plate that doesn't match the vehicle isn't in itself that uncommon, but it could be maybe the car's not reported stolen yet, or maybe they just bought it, they didn't register it yet. There's a multitude of factors there, but it's a concern and it's a valid reason for a stop. And
what do you train officers to think about the person who's running at this point?
Well, just this has continued, this path of noncompliance, and it's escalated from verbal noncompliance to failure to produce an ID, failure to produce a license. Now there's been assaultive behavior. Now they're fleeing on foot. It just continues down a path of lack of cooperation.
And Bob, can you please play the video to RFN 3373? Oh, no, sorry. 4479.
Okay. Stop! Stop! Get your hands behind your back, okay? Hands behind your back, okay? Get your hands behind your back.
Okay, and for the record, this is RFN 4479. Could you zoom in a little on the upper left, which is the dash camera, please? Okay. And could you play this to RFN 4823? Okay, so I guess, sorry, I should have asked you these before this part, but leading up to this point, what did you observe Mr. Leoya do?
So Officer Schurr tackles him to the ground and has to get his radio secured, and is struggling to try to keep him on the ground. And in these clips that we just saw, the driver is able to get back to a tabletop position, if you will, where his hands and knees are on the ground. He's in a good base, meaning it's very challenging to break that back down. And then he's able to even get back up. They go back down, he gets back up. What is striking is the continued that Officer Schurr is unable to physically control him, and he puts out radio traffic of "send me more cars," which now means everybody that's available should be coming emergency mode. So that's the whole city is coming to him because it's an emergency. He's asking for an emergency response. So he's clearly unable to control the driver. He's tried lower levels of force with the tackle, some knee strikes. He's trying to physically push him back down, and he's unable to.
And you mentioned a tabletop position. Can you explain what that is and what that means for the officer?
Yes. So a subject on their hands and knees. Think of a toddler crawling. Right. That position is what we'd refer to as a tabletop position. It's a very strong position if you don't want to be moved. You have your limbs are kind of shortened. You have all your power. In an inside position, I call it, you're tight, and it's challenging to defeat that. And being like riding on somebody's back right there, if I'm trying to put all my weight on them, it's easy to roll that, reverse the situation where the top position now becomes the bottom position, and it's a dangerous situation.
And from the last segment of the video that we just saw zoomed in, what did you observe about Mr. when he was on the ground in the prone position?
Just that he was able to get back to a standing position with relative ease, regardless of what the officer was attempting to do.
And at that point, what was Mr. Leoya's, I'm sorry, this might not be clear. Bob, could you just back up a few frames to RFN 4579? And then frame forward to 4672. If you zoom in on the dash cam. 4579 to 4672. And from this position, when what did you observe?
Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to is that tabletop position. You see the driver's on his hands and knees, and Officer Schurr is, for a lack of a better term, almost like piggybacked, right? He's just riding them. And both feet are off the ground, his hands are off the ground. He's trying to call out on his radio, so he's distracted with his one arm. He doesn't have full control. So he's calling out with his radio, and he's in a bad position because, for example, all the driver would have to do is duck his head forward and lift a little bit, and that officer's going over top of him. So then he's on his back or face down, and then the driver could easily be on top of him.
And a few frames forward, did you see Mr. Lelia on all, when you say, we talked about prone position, can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so prone, just belly down, your face down on the ground, belly down. And that's an ideal handcuffing position for us. We want to be on top while they're prone or face down. As you can see, the officer attempts that multiple times here, and the driver is successful in just standing up on his own power regardless of the force being put on him.
Okay. And were you, did you observe Mr. Lelia go from the ground, stomach down, and push himself all the way up? With
Yes,
Officer
he
Schurr?
did that various stages through here, but yes, he does that. And that in itself is going back to the totality of the circumstances, the factors in use of force decision-making or objective reasonableness, size, strength, ability. Those are the factors. And as this progresses, exhaustion. So it's physically, it's extremely difficult to control another human being that doesn't want to be controlled. It's exhausting. So you can see that this has been going on for several seconds now, this struggle, and the officer is unsuccessful in his application of force at this point.
And at this point, what would you train an officer to look for as far as his surroundings? What would be other indicators you would train an officer to be aware of?
The gentleman in the white, I forget the witness's name, sorry. Is that Mr. Butler?
Mr. Butler.
He's saying something to the driver or the passenger, I forget, but he's there, so that's a concern. He's an unknown subject, whether he's going to help you or help the driver or what that situation is. And then obviously the passenger in the vehicle now is out of the car, and they're both kind of in the peripheral view of Officer Schurr. So now he's got multiple subjects. He's not able to physically control the driver that he's dealing with. So yeah, he's got to be aware and be concerned with it.
And at this point, have you, are Officer Schurr's actions consistent with GRPD policy and training?
Yes.
Okay. Bob, if you could please play through 5408.
Stop! Stop resisting!
Make good enough, he's in nothing.
And based on this, did you, at this point in time, have you heard Officer Schurr call for backup again?
Send me more cars, yes.
And at that point, what would you expect the responding officers in the area to do?
Respond emergency mode, so lights and siren, and get there as soon as possible, as safely as possible.
And what have you observed about Mr. Leoya's behavior during this part of the video?
The verbal okay is not matching his physical actions. Right? He's verbally saying okay, but there's no compliance there. It's the polar opposite. So the officer, they get to their feet, and Officer Schurr tries almost like for lack of a better term, chicken wing his arms behind him. Maybe an attempt to handcuff him, secure him, but they progress across the lawn in a kind of a southerly direction there, and then another knee strike is applied, and then it appears he tries to do some type of a takedown from where he's got him wrapped up in his upper half, and that's unsuccessful as well.
And is there anything that you observe about Officer Schurr throughout this?
Yeah, if you back up a couple frames and play it again, you can hear his heavy breathing. So it appears he's already hitting levels of exhaustion.
And what do you train officers to do once they start feeling exhausted?
Well, and we talk about this a lot, and as they first come aboard, it's kind of accepted that, hey, in 30 seconds of strenuous output, you're roughly going to have about 50% of the energy levels you started that encounter with. So if you're struggling with somebody or fighting with somebody and you start out at 100%, you're going to be greatly reduced here within 30 to 45 seconds. So we teach them to use force reasonably, but with full force initially, because we don't want these to draw out for a longer than they have to.
Why not?
Because the exhaustion level has a bunch of effects to it. It can impair your decision making. Clearly, you potentially can't defend yourself. Your tools on your belt. There's a list of factors, but yeah, exhaustion is a problem.
Okay. Bob, could you please play the video through 5548? And leading up to this point, what did you observe Mr. Leoya doing?
Still actively resisting the officer, zero compliance. And again, like I said, he's giving verbal, okay, like he's going to comply, but he's not showing any compliance at this point. The officer's been unsuccessful in all of his attempts at use of force up to this point. In that bottom left screen, it appears that the officer's got a hold of his sweater, like in the upper shoulder area, and his right arm is going across his body. And as we know now from watching the video multiple times, he's accessing his taser, which is we teach our officers to carry it on their non-dominant side, in a cross-draw style application, like I have mine on my left side, to avoid any type of confusion during a deadly force incident or create that where they pull their taser on accident or vice versa. So we've always dictated they carry it in a cross-draw style. So as you can see, Officer Schurr's arm is coming across his body to retrieve that. And it's of note, it takes him a few seconds to get it out. From the graduation video where he's on the dummy, he struggled and he had two hands to access that. Our old holsters at this time had a snap brake, and the snap went towards your body. So if I was leaning that way, I'm fighting against myself, if that makes sense. So it takes him a little bit of time. He's one-handed, and he's trying to hold the driver with his back, upper shoulder arm area there, his sweater, and access his taser with his right hand.
And Bob, and is there anything that you observed Mr. Leoya saying at this point?
I didn't catch that in any of my reviews because I didn't have the dictation until recently, but the get the keys part. So that is concerning because what's the plan there? Is there a weapon in the car? Was there something? So.
And Bob, could you please play the video through RFN 5649? Okay, if you could back it up just to frame in 5648. Okay. For the record, this is RFN 5648. At this point, what have you observed?
Excuse me. As Officer Schurr has a hold of him and he's trying to access his taser, again, going back to that reaction time, he formulates a plan in his head to grab the taser, but it takes him some time to actually accomplish that. So in that meantime, the driver spins, so now they're face to face. So you're seeing the bottom left frame, Officer Schurr's got a grip of his upper sweater still, because that sweater's loose fitting and he's able to spin on him. So now he's on an inside position, and it's hard to see over your Honor's computer screen there, but he's reaching for Officer Schurr's taser. I can't tell if he does have a hold of it.
And what does the training teach about the dangers of Mr. Leoya having a grab on the taser?
It's quite uncommon, frankly. We have a few a year maybe where there's an attempt disarm, but they're usually holstered. We've had a few incidents over the years where they swat at it to try to deflect it, but we've never had where somebody grabs onto it while it's out of the holster like that and is driving it away from themselves. So that immediately raises huge concern of that's not an attempt to swat it away. They're grabbing hold of it and potentially going to disarm you.
And what does the training teach about the dangers of having a weapon taken away?
Just that the chances are it's going to be used against you. You get disarmed of your firearm. It's the statistics are out there that it's not doesn't end well for officers. So that's the presumption. Yeah.
And how do you train officers to perceive someone who has taken their weapon?
How do you perceive them? Sorry?
Yeah. How do you train officers to, or what do you train officers to think about someone who's reached for and grabbed their weapon?
That it's potentially going to be a deadly force assault. Again, trying to attack an officer and disarm them has escalated into the highest levels of resistance.
And what do what does GRPD train officers to? How are officers trained to assess threats when they're disarmed?
To fight, to retain that weapon, obviously, at all costs, and then fight to get that weapon back.
And what do you train officers to think once they're fully disarmed?
Again, that it's a deadly force encounter. That's not again, like I said, we haven't had a successful weapon disarming in long time, decades. So it happens around the country, and officers are killed yearly because of it. So it's of the greatest threat.
And what does the training teach about the intent of someone who is disarmed as a police officer?
That you have to presume it's for the worst reasons, right? I don't have to, if I get disarmed by firearm, I don't have to wait to have it used against me. That intention alone to grab an officer's weapon is the gravest threat.
Okay. Bob, could you play the video through RFN 5770, please?
They got to work on these bullets.
Okay, and at this point, what do you observe Officer Schurr doing?
So just as the frame starts and the driver grabs hold of the taser, Officer appears to do, I refer to it as like a wheel weapon retention, where he wheels it to the ground in kind of a circular motion to try to break that grip. And if you look at the bottom left screen, the grips of the officer and the driver there, the driver's got a dominant grip. He's got an overhand grip and his arm's locked out, and the officer's got just the handle of that, where the purchase of that taser, the majority of it is on the front of it, not the handle. So he's got a dominant grip over the officer's grip, and the officer's tried a couple weapon retention techniques and has been unsuccessful. And one set of probes is already deployed, where the officer tries to, like I explained earlier, not an ideal distance management, but he could have easily fired one set of probes, fired another set of probes, and gotten the spread that would have accomplished the neuromuscular incapacitation or lockup if he hadn't grabbed on, the driver hadn't grabbed onto the taser.
Okay, and, at this point, what is Mr. Leoya doing?
He's driving that taser away from himself, and it appears towards, and they're, well, the cell phone video shows they're both traveling towards the ground.
Bob, could you play the video, please, through, I don't know yet, but I'll tell you when to stop.
Let go of the taser!
Oh, Bob, sorry, can you stop there and back up a little bit? And zoom in on the cell phone video?
6256.
Yeah, sorry, can you back up? I missed mine. Yeah, if you can go to 5825, or if you can just zoom in and I'll tell you when to stop. If you can go a few frames back.
I can't see the RFN camera.
Okay, if you can just back up and I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, stop. This is RFN 5882. And at this point, what do you observe Mr. Leoya doing with the taser?
He's still got control or attempting to take control of it. You can see Officer Schurr has still got it in that grip that he had before. And it's pointed at the ground. You can see the LED flashlight pointing towards the ground. So now, in that position that Officer Schurr's arm in, it's an odd position, right? He's got that elbow bend going, so the driver's on his back and has, again, locked out arm, a dominant grip.
Okay, and what hand do you observe it in at Mr. Leoya's?
It appears it's his left hand.
Okay. Bob, can you play it moving forward, please? And yes, if you could stop at RFN 6220. Okay, at this point, what do you observe? Where is the taser located at this point?
It's directly into the ground. And again, similar positions. The Officer Schurr's got an odd angle arm, kind of a bent 90-degree arm angle, and the driver's got, again, still a locked out position with what appears to be a dominant grip.
And what hand do you observe the taser in Mr. Leoya's?
It appears it's his right hand now.
Okay. Okay, Bob, can you play the video, please?
No, like he good, like you can talk to him, bro.
1315.
Yeah. Like he good, bro. Like can you talk to him like good, like can you, yeah. Stop grabbing him like that. Nah, he good at first. Yo, you hear him too. Now he ain't probably gonna say it. I see.
Bob, can you stop it here? And zoom out. This is RFN 7489. And at this point, what do you observe? I know the camera went out a little bit, but what do you observe?
The biggest thing that struck me was it sounds, you can hear the stress in Officer Schurr's voice, the exhaustion. He's barely getting out commands. They're lagging, if you will, or they're drawn out because of lack of oxygen. he's breathing so heavy. The positions have switched again to be, again, the driver's in that tabletop type position. And you can see as it backs up, he rolls to that position, and the officer kind of rotates to the top position again. For a brief second there, he's rocking on his back. His feet are off the ground. He's in a very unstable position, and he moves to access his firearm after a command to let go of the taser.
And Bob, if you could zoom in on the cell phone video, please. Where do you observe the taser at this point?
It appears it's in the driver's right hand.
Okay. And Bob, could you just do a frame forward from here? And I'll tell you when to stop. Sorry, you can play it, I guess. Okay. Frame forward from here. Okay. Stop right here. And if you could back up for the RFN. Okay, and what did you observe here?
The struggle, the position is fluid, right? The officer's access his firearm, it's out of the holster. He's trying to maintain some type of a position on top. The driver is now turning back to the inside position, appears where his right hip is towards the ground, and he appears to be spinning into the officer. He's got control of the taser. It's in his right hand, it appears. And the officer's got his left arm kind of draped over the driver's left shoulder to try to maintain some balance.
And at this,
And another command to let go of the taser was in that clip there too.
I think it was drop the taser on that one.
Was it?
Yeah, this is, we're at the, like, right, the
Okay.
last drop the taser. So this is after he had
Oh,
given
it's
the
dropped, sorry.
final command of drop the taser. And at this point, I guess we can just play it forward from here.
Everyone. Six total.
You just packed up, those are great.
It is.
Get back! Thank you, 15. I'll just for the shooting. That'll be great.
1915, 10-4 down Siver. Starting medical.
I'm the outfit. Go to great, let's move forward. Subject down.
Nelson, 10-0, totality. Nelson, north, great, suspect down. 1920, I've seen.
1610, Roger. Subject, the access to any weapons and what do you think? 1950, Enterprise Taser.
Okay, stop. Okay, and for the record, this is RFN 10,181. So leading up to this point, and I know we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but in your experience, how fast can someone on the bottom reposition themselves so they are facing you or gain some sort of advantage? over you?
How fast can they reverse that position? Is that what you're saying? In a blink of an eye. That can be in a second or two.
And in high stress, close quarter situations like this, is it realistic to expect that an officer could stop someone from initiating or completing a full spin if that happens quickly?
I'm sorry, could you ask that one more time?
In this type of situation where it's dynamic, it's moving very quickly, is there a situation, is it realistic to expect that an officer could stop someone from initiating or completing the spin, rolling towards them?
No, in the sense too of the video, if you saw the steamy breath out of Officer Schurr, that would indicate how deep of a guttural breathing he's trying to accomplish there. So at that level of exhaustion, no, I don't believe he could have prevented that situation from spinning in a second or two.
In your opinion, based on your training and experience, does the threat from the bottom position ever end until they're fully controlled?
No.
And based on everything we've reviewed, do you have an opinion on whether an objectively reasonable GRPD officer in Officer Schurr's situation would have been in fear of a serious bodily injury or death when Mr. Loyola started getting up off the ground with his taser in his hand?
I do.
And what is that opinion?
That it was reasonable, that a reasonable officer could perform the same way in that situation.
Thank you. No further questions this time.
Back here. I just want to start out with one of your statements. Your statement was the GRPD's trained to chase and effect an arrest. That's what you just told the jury, correct?
That's a common practice, yes.
Those were your words. Those are your exact words. I wrote it down. Trained to chase and effect an arrest.
Do we train? Yeah, we train our officers to do that, yes. That's an expectation, yes.
But when we were notified you're a witness, you talked to Detective Tubergen, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
You said there's no foot pursuit policy,
There's not a foot pursuit policy, correct?
but you trained them to effect an arrest.
Yes.
Now, this has been pending for like 3 years. Did you prepare this?
I did.
You typed it?
The affidavit?
Yes.
No.
Who typed it?
The defense.
So the defense. So the defense typed it. So
Yes.
you've been meeting, how many times have you met with the defense over the course of the last 3 years?
Probably 5, 6 times.
And you've had access to some of their videos as well. So you've gone over this case with them 5 or 6 times?
I did not have access to the video until now. I haven't seen it till this week.
You
I mean, the video I had access to was Axon, the body camera, cell phone camera, not the forensic video.
But this week, you said the one with the writing on it, you said you had access to it, you watched it earlier this week.
I saw it, yeah, this week. Yes, not before this week.
So this is one of the biggest events in Grand Rapids in probably your career, isn't it?
It is.
And you don't bother to do a report?
I did an incident report.
An expert report. You have access to our expert reports, haven't you?
Your expert reports?
Correct.
Yes,
So you write our expert reports. It's like a 56-page report.
it is.
You're brought up as an expert for the defense. You're their expert, you have at least their degree, GRPD policy, and you produce a 2-page affidavit.
Yes.
Even in that affidavit, you don't say anything about training to chase officers or to effect an arrest. You don't say that in this affidavit, do you?
No.
You say, includes training on solo foot pursuits, such as drills and scenario-based training. GRPD does not prohibit officers from chasing a fleeing suspect.
Correct.
That's different than you train them to apprehend a fleeing suspect, isn't it?
The solo foot pursuit drills will end in an arrest.
Prohibiting and training positively are two different things, aren't they?
Yes.
Where is that policy? Where's the written policy where you train to effectuate an arrest? We spent an hour and a half here looking at all the policies. Where's the written policy where you effect an arrest? You train your officer to effectuate an arrest?
Off a foot pursuit?
Yes.
We don't have one.
You don't have one. But that's your testimony now, suddenly in front of this jury that, yep, we trained that.
Objection, Your Honor. This is argumentative, and if he wants me to go through the mandatory training, I will gladly do that, but
Well, I think he's not cross-examining him. So which part? I mean,
the fact that he's trying to portray that there's no training or policies. I did not walk him through, and if the if you'd like me to walk through this, I'm glad to go through all this, but I'm trying to speed it up.
I'm gonna overrule the objection, and you obviously will be able to redirect, and you can certainly point out what you'd like, but I don't believe that last question was argumentative. So,
I mean, you had an hour and a half to present the policy, and we didn't see any policy. These are the policies were provided. These are the training policies for Officer Schurr.
These are training outlines. These are policies, yes.
Okay. Point it out. Where is it?
His recruit class one is in here? Is that in here?
There's recruit class. We've got everything.
Okay. Yeah, his recruit class is 15-3. These
Sure.
are, this is
These
21,
are the
22.
training documents we have.
He has a recruit class book of 15-3. We, not being argumentative, we train in foot pursuits. We do solo foot pursuit drills. We don't have a policy that mandates, but we don't have a policy that prohibits it.
So it doesn't mandate. You said you train to chase and effect an arrest. It doesn't mandate. It means that basically they can chase based on the circumstances, right?
Yes,
All right, that's a bit different than they just run. You don't train them to be greyhounds chasing after rabbits, then, right?
correct.
It's based on the total facts and circumstances.
Yes,
So if somebody's driving down the road and guy's got a gun in the car, passenger's got a gun in the car, driver flees, you're not going to chase the driver. You're going to stay with the passenger, right?
potentially.
Potentially.
Do we know if he's got a gun? Do you see the gun?
I just said the passenger's got a gun. Passenger's got a gun. Driver flees. You're going to have your officer stay with the guy with the gun, aren't you?
Yes,
Okay. Well, that's based on the totality of the circumstances. Then. That's a little bit different than what you testified to, right?
that situation's completely different.
Sure. So it's based on the totality of the circumstances, just like we've been talking about. All those policies up there, the totality of the circumstances controls, not just you're trying to have an officer just chase anybody that runs down the road.
Yes,
So one of the things we do talk about, and were you in here for former Sergeant Johnston's testimony?
I was not.
You weren't. Well, one of the things he testified to, and he said one of the things that Grand Rapids is very specific on, is every traffic stop is an unknown risk.
That's correct.
Okay? You don't know what you're going into when you get into a traffic stop. Anything can happen, right?
Yes,
And one of the concerns Grand Rapids Police has is guns in the car.
correct.
Guns are, guns on people in the car?
Mhm.
Sandy yes.
Yes, sorry.
Guns under the seat?
Yes,
Guns anywhere in the car.
correct.
So when you pull somebody over, you got to be worried about a gun if you don't know about it.
Potentially, yes,
So every person in the car potentially has a gun.
correct.
Let the record reflect on showing opposing counsel with Marcus Peoples Exhibit 36 for identification purposes. Capt, I'm going to show you what we marked as Exhibit 36 for identification purposes. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Could you tell the jury what that is?
This is a mandatory training, 19-2. 19 means 2019 was the year we performed this, and 02 would mean it's earlier in the year, the second training of the year. So it's a firearms training outline.
Okay. And so this is, we have a number of training documents where you go through mandatory training for your officers, correct?
Yes,
And this would be training that we've received for the defendant that he took in 2019.
correct.
And his signature's on that.
Yeah, sign in, yep, sign in for here.
I would move for the admission of People's Exhibit 36, Your Honor.
is there any objection? No objection. Okay, 36 is more.
Looking, I believe it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. Page 5. The one thing I did find regarding foot pursuits is there a Seattle officer-involved shooting.
Yes,
There's a Seattle officer-involved shooting, and in your foot pursuit, what it talks about there is allow for a safe distance and have a plan while chasing an armed or potentially armed subject. Treat someone you pull over as potentially armed. Isn't that what it says?
it does, yes.
So that's the one thing we could find on foot pursuits is that somebody could be potentially armed. You don't go chasing after them because they could be armed. It's for officer safety, right?
It says allow a safe distance.
Okay.
Have a plan while chasing armed. Or potentially. So
Going
we're still chasing.
hands-on or tackling someone who is known to be armed is bad tactics.
I would agree.
That's what's in the training policy.
That's in the training outline, yes.
Training outline, but that's the outline. That's what you're telling your officers. That's what the defendant would have learned back in 2019.
Yeah, this specific training, correct.
One of the things he also talks about is maybe discontinue the foot chase and set a perimeter.
Potentially, yes.
So officers are perfectly fine in discontinuing, not chasing after, not mandatorily running after them, correct?
Correct.
In terms, staying with this foot pursuit policy, you are familiar with the International Chiefs of Police, correct?
I am, yes.
The International Chiefs of Police, you're a member of it.
I am.
Your chief's a member of it.
He is.
Both deputy chiefs are a member of it.
They are.
And so they have a foot pursuit policy that they've come up with, correct?
They do, yes.
2019, July of 2019, they came up with a foot pursuit policy, a model, if you will.
Yes.
In that model, don't they say that chasing officer individually chasing a suspect is inherently dangerous?
That's what it says. It does. I don't.
You
I'm not.
read it?
I'm not exactly familiar with the verbiage of it, but I'll take your word for it, sir.
You know, I looked through it.
Is that an exhibit or just something that you?
Well, not exhibit at this point in time. If he's not familiar with it, let him read it.
I would object to that, that's hearsay.
What?
That
I don't even know,
document is-
wait, so it's not, he's not moving for its submission, he's showing a document to the witness. So, I'm not sure, what is that document?
This is a model foot pursuit policy from the International Chiefs of Police. So you're familiar with it, but you've never read it?
We don't have one, so no, I don't. I didn't. I've read it before, but it's been years. It's been out for 5 years, 6 years. So
Well, I guess you've read it. Why haven't you done anything with it? You're the trained. Why hasn't Grand Rapids adopted it?
the direction of the agency, we don't want a foot pursuit policy.
You don't want a foot pursuit policy.
Correct.
But you would agree that the International Chiefs of Police say they're inherently dangerous, correct?
Yes, they do.
Would you disagree that they're inherently dangerous?
No.
Would you disagree with their recommendation that at least 2 officers be involved in a foot pursuit?
Ideally,
Ideally, but they say that's what you should do. Of course, you don't know because you haven't fully read it. Are you familiar with Police Magazine?
I am.
Okay, Police Magazine.
I would just object to all this.
Learn treatise, Your Honor. We can impeach with learn treatise under the Michigan Rules of Evidence
The police
707.
magazine is not a learned treatise.
He can, if he understands it, what it is, he says he uses it, it doesn't have to be
I didn't say I use it. I said I'm familiar with it.
You don't read it?
I don't read the magazine regularly. I'm familiar with it.
So, how is this relevant? We're here to talk about
Well,
Michigan.
if it's impeachment, is that a learned treatise? I don't know that it is.
Police magazine?
It's something that the police, we heard yesterday, police, you were here for the testimony of our experts, they rely on it, correct?
They said they did, yes.
You don't ever read Police Magazine?
I didn't say I don't read it. I said we don't rely on it for policy advisement or direction.
Don't rely on it for direction, so you just do your own thing then? You don't rely on the International Chiefs of Police?
I'm sorry, I need to rule of the objection, I did want to check MRE 707.
707.
Which does allow for the use of learned treatises for impeachment, which includes statements contained in published periodicals or pamphlets. It doesn't have to be in the textbook, so I will overrule the objection under that rule for impeachment purposes only.
So Police Magazine, foot pursuits by their very nature are emotionally charged and dangerous events that occur frequently in police work. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
I would.
Law enforcement officers must balance their obligation to enforce the law and arrest perpetrators with their personal safety. You'd agree with that.
It's fair?
Unfortunately, that rarely happens. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
More often than not, officers become emotionally captivated by the event and have an instinctive reaction rather than a studied and planned response to resistance and chase without considering the inevitability of suspect capture. Would you agree with that?
It's possible, yes.
Possible. But that's one of the dangers of somebody's running away, they want to get away, and you rush off and tackle them by yourself. All of a sudden, you got your hands full and you're not aware of it. You're not aware of what could happen next.
Potentially.
And that's one of the things that you teach in Grand Rapids Police in terms of the reactionary gap.
Yes.
Right? So a reactionary gap is the further away somebody is, the better off you are in essence, because you have an opportunity to respond. Is that a fair? I'm not.
Sure. At times in a situation, yes.
Situation. But as soon as you chase somebody and tackle them, you close that reactionary gap.
Yes.
And that kind of goes back to the 2019 outline of the foot pursuit thing, that if somebody's potentially armed, all of a sudden you tackle somebody that's potentially armed, you could be in a world of hurt, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Because of the time, I'm not sure how much further you have, we do have redirect as well, so.
Yep.
What we'll do is we'll break for the day, because it's 4:45, and so again, please leave your notes upside down in your chairs, and remember that you're not to discuss the case at all with each other or with anyone else. Also, continue to avoid any news reports in the media and in social media. And what we'll do is return and resume testimony tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Not this time. I'm sorry, I thought you said anything further, I'm sorry. I thought I heard you.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is recess for the evening. Is there anything you need to address before we recess?
Nothing from you.
Okay.
That's another question.
I do want to state for the record that there was a question that a juror asked that was not asked. And it really wasn't a question. I did say on the record that it wasn't a question. The juror was simply pointing out that there was an exhibit still on the witness stand. Didn't know if it mattered. So it wasn't really a question, but I did want to place on the record because it was clear on the record that the juror did have a question and it was not addressed on the record. So there's that. And if there's nothing else, thank you very much. You guys got now.
Thank you, Adam.
And the court will be in recess until tomorrow morning at 8:30.